Hey everybody, welcome back to another week here at the Young Turks. Almost said damage report. I'm here.
What's that?
It's this thing.
It's like a webinar.
That sounds more dignified than it usually ends up being. Nando, welcome back. Francesca, great to have you here.
Good to be here.
I've heard rumors, by the way, later in the week, Cenk Uyghur's gonna be around. That's gonna be a treat.
Who's he?
Also, never heard of
Don't know
him or that. I'm not really sure.
Probably
Where
hosts
am
that
I?
damage
What
thing.
is it, Cenk?
Yeah. Now look, I want to give you an idea of what you can expect. First of all, in the second hour, Brett and Jason Carter are going to be here, so that should be a lot of fun too. This hour, we do have some news, and then we also have a lot of. It's Mike Bloomberg. I mean, because it turns out he talked a lot over the past few years, and it was almost always a bad choice.
Yes, he has talked a lot.
Oh, I thought it was because we all got checks over the weekend. Did you guys not?
I'm just,
Not supposed to announce the endorsement yet. It's supposed to be Super Monday.
Oh,
we
right.
announce it. But anyway, we're gonna go over some of what Bloomberg has been saying. Also, near the end of the hour, I had something that I wanted to talk about, and it involves some of what I've seen, especially in Meet the Press, of sort of like Dem primary electoral math that I think is kind of ridiculous. So we're gonna address that near the end.
Yeah.
But anyway, why don't we start off with something very serious, and then we can have fun with Mike Bloomberg and all of that. So down at the border, Donald Trump's war against any form of immigration continues. In this case, a new tactic, more underhanded than I could imagine, seeming maybe even worse than the caging when it comes to migrant children, the way they've been treated during their mandated therapy sessions. So to bolster its policy of stepped up enforcement, the Trump administration is requiring that notes taken during mandatory therapy sessions with immigrant children be passed on to ICE, which can then use those reports against minors in court. So like if you've ever been to a therapist, so I've been to a therapist, they take all those notes, presumably, they're not drawing or anything. All of that then goes to the people who are trying to build a case to send you out of the country. So any stories you tell about the time before you migrated, anything that happened to you while you were coming to America, any dreams you've had, worries or fears, any of this sort of stuff will be used by ICE officers to justify continual detainment or possibly even sending you out of the country. Now we're gonna have examples of how this has played out, but I wanted your initial reactions to this tactic because I hadn't heard about them doing this before.
When you talk about the Trump administration and sort of the looming threat of fascism, like I think a lot of the times that's semi-overblown, except for in the case of ICE and its activities in the last 4 years. Like this is just so textbook fascisty, I would say. It's absolutely horrifying that they would just completely suspend any sort of ideas of habeas corpus, of due process, of anything that is just like the cruelty of this is just so unbelievable. Like the extent to which they went to deport this poor guy in the example in the article is it's just mind-boggling. You know that they could use your own therapy sessions, which are obligatory against you. You know, like self-incrimination, all the stuff that we claim to care about in this country just goes completely out the window when we're talking about an other, which in this case, immigrants, which is just fascism 101. I mean, and it makes me worried that say like there was a new administration, say there was a Bernie Sanders administration, like would ICE obey orders, or are they have they just been so radicalized and rogue that they would go completely, brown shirts and out of control? Like it's honestly terrifying.
Yeah, I mean, I would assume, maybe that's a war we'll have to see.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the specifics of this case are not actually all that specific, meaning the kind of terror that this child, because he just turned 18, had been facing for years. He's been in detention for 2 years already. But the kinds of things that he's been facing are the kinds of stories that we've been hearing from minors for so many years. And there is a crisis because there is gang violence, right? In, I think his country of origin is El Salvador. And so talks about to his therapist under confidentiality, right, that he was beat by his grandmother who was an alcoholic, and then she died, and that was some relief. But then MS-13 took over his home and then forced him into selling drugs, right, which is now being used against him, even though he was forced by a gang to do so. Then his cousin was also taken by MS-13, refused to comply with MS-13, and then he was forced to brutalize his own cousin in front of the gang in order to spare his life. This child has been through so much. And in fact, a judge ruled that he had been through enough and that I can't remember who it was, but they were gonna give him bond and he could leave. Well, then ICE intervened again and said, no, we're taking it for him. We're gonna re-detain you. You can't get out on bond. And I guess when it comes to immigration, this administration, part of that fascism is deterrence, right? Like, we're going to make it so horrible to immigrate to this country, whether it's by the wall, by Customs and Border Patrol, whether it's ICE, whether it's not giving you medical attention, whatever it's going to be, that therefore you will not immigrate. Well, what are you doing then? You're directly competing with who? MS-13. You are competing and saying, no, we can be worse than MS-13 and you should stay there. Essentially, you're becoming a gang. No, it is tough. So when Trump rails against how, well, it's these gangs and we're letting them into this country. No. The victims of gang violence are trying to seek asylum in this country, and your response is, no, we're going to be as bad as the gangs. And they just need to fess up to that and say, yeah, no, we're actually trying to be as bad as the gangs. And until the US and Customs and Border Patrol is kidnapping people and forcing them into drug selling, then children and people who are escaping violence will always choose to leave. They will always choose to leave unless we get our own gang violence, which we're nearing there.
Because we're talking about this, I want to jump ahead to the 5th graphic because Francesca gave you a good idea of that kid's life story, that like abused by his family, forced to abuse other parts of his family at the threat of death, was gonna be obligated to murder a random person to prove his loyalty to a gang he wanted nothing to do with, so he fled. Like, you would think if America was worth anything, it could save that child. But it can't, not the current America, doesn't want to anyway. And so that life experience, which we just talked about and Kevin relayed to his therapist, here is how ICE described that. Case notes provided by ORR. Per case notes, Kevin is affiliated with MS-13 in Honduras. Kevin was allegedly involved in a plot to kill his cousin. He has gang ties, poses a danger to the community, and is a flight risk. No, he's a death risk, as in if you send him back, you will be killed by MS-13.
Yes.
But they don't care. It's not their job to care.
And what's horrifying to think is that, MS-13 is obviously a direct result of long-standing US policy, whether it was the Reagan supporting death squads in Central America, which killed several 100,000 people, which caused a huge migration crisis in the 1980s, many of whom settled in Los Angeles, then became involved in gangs and got caught up in the criminal justice system. MS-13 was created in Los Angeles jail system. Then when they were deported, they brought that back to El Salvador. This guy is from Honduras, which it's worth remembering. The Obama administration and the Hillary Clinton-led State Department in 2009 supported a military coup in Honduras, which and has since then the United States has supported their right-wing. We call it president, but it's like a pseudo dictator, and has caused a huge social crisis in Honduras, which has led to this migration wave that we're seeing. So these are the direct results of US policy. And it's interesting because we never hear about Honduras and El Salvador. The country that we always hear about is our stated enemy, which is Nicaragua. They're not coming from Nicaragua. They're coming from our allies, which are Honduras and El Salvador. So
you mean political enemy because they have a more left-wing government?
Yes, political enemy because they're the Sandinista government, which we hate because they won the war in the 1980s. Yeah, it's just US policy has its fingerprints all over this poor kid's life. From the moment he was born to the day he is deported back to Honduras. US policy has touched this kid's life in so many ways that are absolutely horrifying, and it goes to show that the Trump administration is obviously a worse iteration of what longstanding US policy is, but it is just the tip of the iceberg of something that's been going on for so long in Central America.
Well, we've reached a breaking point. So like, I think when you have more authoritarian fascist tendencies, right? You're like, well, yeah, well, we should just, lock them all up and put them in cages and deport them. And then Democrats who've been willingly militarizing the border for decades now, and like you said, supporting coups in Honduras, which is absolutely, there was a spike in violence after that happened, have also been pouring tons and tons of money into the very things that are making the humanitarian crisis in these countries even worse.
Yeah.
So when you reach a breaking point, and that is sort of, I think, why a lot of people have been pushed to say, let's abolish ICE.
Yeah.
Because the reform is no longer a viable option here. And we're either faced with these two horribly militaristic, xenophobic, like abuses of human rights, or hey, let's just demilitarize. Hey, why is this body even here? It's not doing good.
Yeah, I wanna, in addition though, so if you read the full article, which is available on the Washington Post by Hannah Dreier, they do go into depth into Kevin's story, but there are other examples because it's a widespread policy that's affecting a lot of people. I wanna give you a few ideas of how it's happened. So in Arizona, there was a 15-year-old who told a therapist he had participated in 50 murders. A number he quickly took back and said it had been a boast. It wasn't based on anything.
Obviously.
No, I think he killed 50 people.
Yeah, Jesus.
He was moved to high security detention and his asylum case remains under review. In California, a teenager who had been detained for 11 months already confided to shelter staff that he wanted to die. In an asylum hearing, the confession was read aloud as evidence he was a danger to himself and should be deported.
Yes,
What?
that makes sense. That's totally a thing that makes sense.
Yep. In Virginia, a 16-year-old told a shelter therapist that his brother was wanted for murder in El Salvador. The therapist reported that the 16-year-old himself was involved in a murder and he was transferred that same day to secure detention. So look, I'm glad that she sketched out sort of how we got here and how the policies of our government have created it. At this point, they get here, all that, we can't fix all of that.
No.
Yeah.
Hopefully therapy could do something, but that itself has been turned into a tool of oppression. And then, like, how easy would it have been to save Kevin? To let Kevin in, integrate him into America? It would have cost America nothing. But we won't even do
A fraction of
that.
what it costs to hold him for 2 years in a detention center, and then
Which has got to be expensive.
Yeah, and then lawyers, all these deportation cases are hugely expensive. They involve judges and lawyers and all that stuff, and that stuff costs money.
Yeah.
And instead of you could bring him into the United States, attach a social worker who is trying to help him and integrate him into society. Put him as part of our education system. We could have saved this kid. Instead, we're probably condemning him to either instant death, or he's probably gonna have to be forced to choose, if he still has this option, to rejoin a life of gang violence.
Yeah. Right.
So,
and it's interesting because we talk about the broken criminal justice system, and it is very broken. And when it comes to people currently living in this country and citizens, but then when you talk about immigration law and courts on the border and all the it's even worse. If we can imagine how much more terrible it is. I remember hearing this one immigration judge, and she was saying, well, it's like issuing a death sentence or a life and death case. It's like ruling on a life and death case in traffic court. So you're just sort of
processing them,
processed in and out. But that is the difference between people dying, people living. And I think, when you think about a 17-year-old, 18-year-old being held in detention for multiple years, yeah, they are gonna become a risk to themselves because it will drive you crazy. And now you have someone who you were told was going to listen to you in confidence is using your own words against you. It's terrifying.
Yeah. So obviously, very sad story. We do have to take our first break. When we come back, things will get a little bit lighter, although the implications for the election with Mike Bloomberg pretty dark. But anyway, we're gonna evaluate some of his recent statements after this.
We hope you're enjoying this free clip from the Young Turks. If you want to get the whole show and more exclusive content while supporting independent media, become a member at tyt.com/join today. In the meantime, enjoy this free segment.
Welcome back to the Young Turks, everybody. Before we jump back into the news, I did want to read some of your comments. I saw Member comments from the architect who just said, "We are the monsters."
That sounds very ominous. Sounds like a villain in like a Bond movie.
Exactly.
He's the architect.
Just saying, we are the monsters.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, we are. And in the Ethernet said, "President's Day treat power panel on Monday." It's unofficial, but yes.
Clever name in the Ethernet.
Exactly. Armando says on the super chat, "When will Nando get his own TYT show?"
Well, you know.
Make it happen.
I mean, you'll have to
like Ken
assassinate.
Klippenstein says, rise and grind.
Right, rise and grind every morning.
Okay, so let's see. And then on the hashtag TYT Live, Melissa Matrice says, "Nothing is better for your mental health than being tossed out of your country to die."
Yeah.
Yeah.
You can't have mental health problems if you're dead. Think about it.
That's so dark and true. Okay, with that, let's moderately lighten things up. We've got some Mike Bloomberg for you.
Yes.
I apologize to both of you. I know neither of you want to talk about this, but we're going to talk about Mike Bloomberg a bit. It would seem that Mike Bloomberg would have some issues in his past that would affect him in a Democratic primary. Stop and frisk seems like a pretty big one. His whole relationship with multiple communities that are non-white inside New York. But he is trying to get out in front of it. Out in front by, I mean, he's got some ads which we're gonna show you. Bear in mind, he's never had to go on a debate stage. He hasn't been interviewed. There's been no communications between Mike Bloomberg and the electorate that he has not controlled through his own advertising revenue. But he does have that revenue. And so here is some ads that have to do with his record in that area. Here's the first.
When I came home from prison, my sons were in their teens. I got involved in juvenile justice. I didn't want them to go through the same thing I went through. Michael Bloomberg created the Young Men's Initiative and helping keep other young men and young women from entering into the criminal justice system. And we see it in young people being employed. We see young people being removed out the system. And that's what justice looks like for me. And I think that's what Mike Bloomberg's done for my community and throughout the city of New York.
I mean, that ad just hurts on a very fundamental level to watch.
I just hope everyone in these ads is getting well compensated. That's
Paid.
all I could say. Get that money, you know,
Says
like
he's a community
take
organizer.
It's fine. Like, I'm not
assuming
trying to
he
knock
knows
what
about-
he's doing. Yeah, no, listen, take the money. I'm not really mad at that, but saying that Mike Bloomberg has tried to stop young black men from entering the criminal justice system is just the most cruel thing anyone's ever claimed. Mike Bloomberg's policies are the reason many young black men entered into the criminal justice system to begin with, after being thrown up against a wall just by the color of their skin and the neighborhood they were walking in. So please spare us.
This Mike Bloomberg campaign is a hugely clarifying moment for me, and I think for a lot of people who see that a lot of the liberal elite is just straight up for sale and don't actually care about any of the things they profess to care about. Like if, the sort of Democratic Party has branded itself the party of minorities for the last 20 or 30 years. Minorities have always suspected that they take their support for granted and don't actually believe any of the things they profess to believe about being committed to anti-racism, being committed to ending, the criminal justice, heinous criminal justice system that we have. But the reality is that a huge chunk of those people don't actually care about any of that stuff. Because if you see anyone supporting Mike Bloomberg, that's what that tells you. It tells you that they don't care about any of that stuff. Any of the stuff they've proposed to care about in the last 20 or 30 years.
Yeah.
So it's gonna be a very clarifying moment. And the other aspect of it is that he has so much money that he can single-handedly prop up an entire TV network with ad spending. I mean, if you look at the numbers, I mean, that's like the bottom line of a ton of news organizations throughout the country could be single-handedly dependent on Mike Bloomberg's money, which is gonna, once again, prove like every single Chomskyite in, reading Chomsky like in their dorm smoking weed has a better understanding of the way the media works than, these people who pretend that these things don't have an effect, because what you're gonna see is a bunch of networks treat Mike Bloomberg with kid gloves.
Yeah. So far, he hasn't even gotten within a mile of the gloves.
Yeah.
So honestly, we don't know because apparently, if you have enough money, you can buy all the ads you want, and you never have to answer to literally anyone.
Well, he owns his own cable news network. Exactly. That's a small little detail. Yeah. He has his own entire cable news network that he could just turn into like a campaign propaganda arm.
And so, in terms of the clarifying moment, it is both that he is the rejection of all of what these elites have said they care about, but also happening at the same time that you have a candidate that has the coalition they've been saying they want for literally decades. So they have to throw that to the side as they embrace Mike Bloomberg. And look, by the way, there are some people, some regular people who are gonna be duped by all of these ads. He's the only person they'll have seen because he's advertising in literally 50 states simultaneously. And they will be fooled into thinking not that he has the right positions, because you could watch as many ads of his as you want. You'll never know what any of his positions are, but that he can win, which relies on you having no idea how elections actually work because he is a disaster.
Bloomberg has 60 sexual harassment cases against him.
Yeah.
6-0. Those are the only ones that were actually, reported. I mean, there could be many more instances of actual sexual harassment where the woman didn't have the courage to actually, file a lawsuit. So,
or felt, especially at that time, that if she did, she would lose her career and no one would listen to her.
Exactly. But look, we think of all these Democrats who were blue in the face, outraged at Trump's grab him by the blank tape, rightfully so. But if they could then turn around and support Mike Bloomberg, then I'm sorry, you cannot be mad about Trump about that kind of thing. But he doesn't say it
openly, okay? There's a difference, you know?
He's not caught on tape.
Or he wasn't caught on tape saying it openly. And when he didn't use the P word, he used the V word, and that was just respectful.
He's woke.
No, listen, Bloomberg has he has a longer record, if it is possible to have a longer record of being a racist and sexist than Trump. That's Bloomberg. Bloomberg has more of a political record. Yeah, Trump has a non-political record of being a racist and a sexist, but Bloomberg's actually enacted his racist policies. And especially, I know we might look at Black America for Mike, no. And whenever I think of anyone who's viable and who can beat Trump, I always think about how Trump will co-opt a progressive critique of that candidate to his advantage, like we saw him do with Clinton all the time. And we know that actually, other candidates like Bernie Sanders are a lot less weak on that front. But when it comes to going against Bloomberg, it's Trump is gonna not stop talking about stop and frisk. It'll be endless. And his lies about how African-American unemployment is down, and his lies to the African-American community, which are again just as full of nothing as Bloomberg's, but he will weaponize that.
Yeah, and I love that on cable news, there are a couple figures who you can see smoothly transition from it looks like Bernie Sanders could beat Trump, but he's never been attacked before, to Bloomberg's the guy. I think Bloomberg can totally do it, but they do that. Okay, so I'm getting from both of you that this first ad hasn't won you over.
No, but I'm open-minded.
Bloomberg's yet.
Yeah, my Venmo account, Mike Bloomberg, is at Nando Vila. If you deposit,
there's an R?
$1 million. Yeah, because my name's Rodriguez-Vila. It's very long.
You're gonna get $1.
Well, okay, I can't confirm he's gonna give you that money, but he does have a second ad, so let's take a look at that.
For hundreds of years, Americans systematically stole Black lives, Black freedom, and Black labor. And I know my story would have turned out very differently if I had been Black. So today I'm proposing a sweeping strategy to invest in Black wealth creation. The wealth gap is inextricably linked to the racial inequalities of the past. And I'm determined to make breaking that link a centerpiece of my presidency.
That is the most intellectually offensive ad I've ever seen in my life. It's inextricably linked to the inequities of the past. It is. But in some cases, it ain't that far in the past for
your administration in New York. What the Bloomberg administration in New York taught us, which by the way, he did the thing that Evo Morales was military coup for, which was extend his term limits to 3 terms.
That's right.
But we don't talk about that ever. But what the Bloomberg mayorship of New York has taught us is that a huge swath of well-to-do, middle-class, white liberals will accept a sort of soft fascism, like a light police state in their own world, as long as they are personally not affected, but they do not care about any of the underclass at all. And this is a good example of why that is, because as long as someone uses the right words, If someone says like, oh, systemic racism is linked to the past or whatever, but what can be done about it? All that stuff. As long as they say the right buzzword, they sound like a campus, speaker or something in 2020.
What about reparations?
Yeah, Bloomberg's gonna come out for reparations in 2 seconds.
Dude, honestly, come out for reparations. That's where that ad was going. It was like, histories of systemic racism, blah, blah, blah. Reparations. Do it, Bloomberg. Come on, just come on.
He could
And you think he's gonna get pushed on it by the media?
Yeah,
he can
That would be a
personally
gesture.
pay reparations. Do you think but he will definitely get pushed on that, right? Like he'll be asked by,
You're talking about his record in this area?
Yes, he'll be asked about reparations. Remember how all the candidates about 6-10 months ago were about, are you for or against reparations? I know Bloomberg is gonna get asked about that. Here's the thing, the only difference between Mike Bloomberg and Donald Trump is that on their way from Earth to Elysium, Bloomberg will airdrop a bunch of diet soda. And that's, that's love. Thank you. We are thirsty.
Yeah. No, it's the whole thing. It has me in a very, very dark place, to be honest. Like the prospect of Bloomberg buying the Democratic nomination. Well, I don't even think he could, because he can't win outright. I genuinely don't think there is a path for him to win the 1990 delegates.
Get even a plurality, let alone a majority.
I don't think so. So the only way that he gets the nomination is through some DNC chicanery at the convention, in which case there will absolutely be a rupture in the Democratic Party. It would break the party apart. It would go the way of the Whigs in the 19th century when they couldn't pronounce themselves on the slavery issue. They were like, you know what, maybe we'll just do like a middle of the road policy on it.
It's still a long way off, but I don't want to make any promises, but there are political environments that I would have very little interest doing this job in. And I can see multiple of them potentially coming. I guess the only thing going against that is that I have no other marketable skills. So I guess we'll see you in the future.
Just join the Bloomberg campaign, just sell out.
Honestly, give in, join the campaign.
They could use you.
I don't know if I have enough Instagram followers for him to value my influence.
What do you guys think about him on the debate stage, though?
I think he is going to be, like I saw a movie called Crawl, and there was a scene where a person is torn apart by 5 alligators at the same time. Ooh. I'm hoping that's what it is.
Here's the one thing every single billionaire in the world has in common, which is that they surround themselves with yes men.
Yeah.
They are not used to being told that whatever it is that they're doing is not right or anything like that. And they really don't like actual pushback on any of this. Like they freak out. I mean, that's what's gonna happen on the debate stage. Like Bloomberg's gonna be surprised at the hostility coming to him from all the candidates. Because I think, obviously Bernie has his own reasons, but I think every single other candidate's gonna start attacking him. And the ones that don't are gonna be very telling. It's like
I think it's gonna be complete vindication for Bernie and his entire platform these 6 years, which has been talking about how billionaires have way too much influence in our economy and our political system. It's like a kid being like, Mom, Dad, the boogeyman's literally under my bed. And they're like, oh, that's so cute. And then like the boogeyman comes in the living room like, hey, sup?
Here's a giant bag of money. Here's the bag with the dollar sign.
Do you guys wanna work for me or what? And then Bernie's gonna be like, look, right there. But I guess I feel like he should still not be allowed on the debate stage. And I know he'll have to answer for all of his policies and his BS, but I feel like if he goes ignored, there's nothing worse than being ignored. And if he goes ignored, he's just sort of this weird offshoot candidate who's buying a lot of ads and he's got people, I guess, and he'll poll a little bit, but he won't, it immediately takes him seriously, and dare I say, kind of like the way we took Trump too seriously from the beginning, later when he, became serious, but
Trump didn't spend this kind of money.
No, of course, but I feel like
and he's in a national poll today, he's in second.
Yeah.
No.
I still
he's at 20%.
You think the debate will deflate him?
I think, well, look, the interesting thing for me will not be what the candidates do. I have a feeling of what the candidates are gonna do, but it'll be interesting to see, will the moderators just start listing his quotes the way Megyn Kelly did with Trump back in 2016? Bring up the kill it, bring up the minimum wage should never be raised, bring up the Israel should bomb Palestinian hospitals and schools. Bring
every
up the
single issue.
The NSA should read every email. Like every issue, he's got the worst imaginable position on it. Just list them. I'm gonna do that tomorrow on the damage report, by the way. The top 10 worst.
Here's a free moderator video. Just mail it to all the moderators.
But will they do that?
No.
Okay, so look, we have a lot more to talk about. I do want to transition to another topic though, but still, Mike Bloomberg. One of the top issues in this Democratic primary I think we had a little bit of an issue there. One of the top issues this Democratic primary is healthcare, obviously. We wanna know where all of these candidates stand on healthcare. And we're still getting an idea with Mike Bloomberg, but a recent video has come around the internet today where he does talk about one place where he would draw a line when it comes to healthcare. Let's listen.
If you're bleeding, they'll stop the bleeding. If you need an X-ray, you're gonna have to wait. That's just, and all of these costs keep going up. Nobody wants to pay any more money. And at the rate we're going, healthcare is gonna bankrupt us. So not only do we have a problem, it's gonna bankrupt us. And we've got to sit here and say which things we're gonna do and which things we're not. Nobody wants to do that. You know, you show up with prostate cancer and you're 95 years old, we should say, go and enjoy, have a nice meal, lead a long life. There's no cure. And you can't do anything. If you're a young person, we should do something about it. Society's not willing to do that yet. So we're gonna bankrupt us.
So, if you're old, you know, like we were talking before the show about there was the myth of the death panels, like this formal thing that you go before and they decide whether you get care or not. He's found a way around that whole thing. You don't even get the panel.
No panel. Just executive order, you die. You know, like this. By the way, what Bloomberg is saying is a totally mainstream belief amongst both the establishment of the Republican Party and the establishment of the Democratic Party. Both establishments believe that entitlements are going to bankrupt us and that they need to be cut. So it's not the thing about Bloomberg is because he's so rich. He says the quiet part out loud. Yeah. It's another reason why this is a hugely clarifying thing because most at least Democratic politicians have the sense to not say those things out loud. They say it behind closed doors and in private.
Yes.
They don't say it out loud because they know it would just destroy their popularity with voters because that is literally the most unpopular position in American politics is cutting healthcare spending and cutting Social Security. But that is an absolutely mainstream view in the establishment of both parties.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, let's just listen. Let's just remember that if anyone else other than Bloomberg had said, if you get prostate cancer, c'est la vie, ride it out, die. Buddy, like absolutely disqualifying, totally disqualifying. And Bloomberg, I will hold you to that, buddy. 95, we're checking your prostate, man. Like,
I will personally check Bloomberg's prostate the day he turns 95 years old.
We're taking one for the team here. Nando's taking one for the team.
I'll do it.
He's checking Bloomberg's prostate. Do you think any billionaire billionaires want to live forever? We know that. I think though, the thing for me is that what Bloomberg's doing and what Nando you were talking about was that we talk about healthcare costs as if there's they just sort of fall on us like dewdrops in the morning. Like we don't know where they come from. They're just like, it's like the tooth fairy. We're just suddenly, blessed with tons of debt. No, healthcare costs are rising because private health insurers are making a killing off of our sickness. Yeah. That's why the costs are going up, and yet we are never able to talk about reining in those costs and actually reining in those industries, whether it's the private health insurance industry, the pharmaceutical industry. It's like that is the thing that Bloomberg's. Yeah, look at this.
Yeah, that's what we're talking about.
No, listen, I was having a great moment, but no, please, take it up. What Bloomberg is basically saying.
Let's talk about the rectal exam again.
Let's talk about the rectal exam. What Bloomberg is saying is that he will not confront the health insurance industry. That he is too scared, he is too cowardly, and he's too in the pockets of health insurance industry, the health insurance industry or pharmaceuticals. That he's not going there. And I think we should hear that when he says those things, and we should hear that when anyone says, well, the costs are just going up. No, they're going up because someone is making them go up.
Yeah, and by the way, almost everything, like I couldn't actually do it, but I know good people who would just start making the ads against Bloomberg because he's providing everything you possibly need. People actually do kind of hate billionaires, like they've gotten a taste of Trump. I don't think they want another one. Like imagine this guy going around saying, when you hit a certain age and you get sick, you're gonna die. You think Bloomberg is gonna die when he hits 95?
No.
Bloomberg could be 107 years old with some sort of weird degenerative uranium poisoning, and he's gonna get $20 billion worth of medical care.
Yeah.
He will always be fine. He says minimum wage should never be raised. He's gonna be fine money-wise. Like the idea that they're not running ads against him yet, and perhaps they're worried about the thing you said about like sort of legitimizing him. I would argue when he hits 20% in the national polls and he's in second, you should probably do something about it. It's insane. And by the way, the example he gave there is you hit 95 and you get prostate cancer. Do you think that's actually where he would have them draw the line? 95 and prostate cancer? No, that's gonna be a lot lower in practice. It already is in practice for most people. Even people who are lucky enough to have health insurance aren't necessarily receiving the coverage necessary when something truly disastrous happens. And that is a status quo that he is perfectly comfortable with continuing because he doesn't exist in that status quo.
Right.
He exists in Elysium, where they get the best medical care imaginable, technologies we've never heard of before.
Exactly.
Well, the worrying thing about Bloomberg is that I think he says those things not because he's in the pocket of anyone, because he's richer than all of them. He has no monetary interest in any pharmaceutical industry or anything at all. It's deep-seated ideology, and it speaks to his natural tendency toward authoritarianism, which is what he is. He is a Republican authoritarian. I mean, he was a Republican up until 2 seconds ago, and he instituted a massively authoritarian state in New York City. So these things are deep within him. They are what he believes. They're his honest ideological commitments. If he was in the pockets of X, Y, or Z industry, I'd almost be more forgiving, because then you can get some other one to be in the pocket of whoever,
Right, but the ideology is that no one can lose money no matter what.
Right.
No matter what, people need to be able to make money, and by people I mean, my friends on my space trip.
Yeah. Okay, I want to show you one more video. We only have time for brief responses, but I think this is an interesting one. Okay, we're gonna do that after the break. We're gonna take a short one. We'll be back after this.